guys, welcome back to the Live Out Love podcast. I'm so excited for another episode this summer, and today I'm here with Sophie.
Hello.
And she's the host of a podcast called Honey in the Rock. Is that correct? And so I just want Sophie to tell a little bit about yourself and then kind of like what made you start Honey in the Rock.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be a freshman at Furman in the fall. I have two older brothers that are both at Furman. It's kind of like a family thing. My parents are there. I tried to fight the urge, but I couldn't help it. But I'm going to go into some sort of ministry. I don't really know what that looks like yet. I'm just trusting that the Lord is going to, finish what he called me to, and I know he's going to provide and make a way. And so I'm just sort of saying yes to opportunities that come up. And, just figuring that out. And so that kind of goes into why I started the podcast. Oh, I live in Greenville also.
Okay. Yeah.
So I started the podcast going on 2 years now. So my friend was killed, and this goes into my testimony. I'll share a little bit. My friend was killed in a car accident in 2020. And that was like the first hard thing that I had been through. I grew up in a church, and it was just kind of like, oh yeah, Jesus, like so fun. And when that happened, I was like, okay, I need to wake up and either go one direction with the world, or I need to wake up and I need to choose this narrow path with Jesus. And thankfully, a lot of wise adults came into my life at that same time and just sort of kept a hold of my heart. And I just felt very alone. I struggled with a lot of things that I'll share with later, but I was like really struggling, and I was like, nobody else my age goes through this, because I just hadn't heard of it. And it was a lot of old ladies tell me like, oh, I struggled with that when I was younger. But I'm like, yeah, but you're 55 now. Yeah. I am still in high school. Like, is this painful forever? Am I going to be struggling forever like this? And so I just was like, I know I need to share my story. I know I need to start talking, and not because I thought I knew it all or had it all figured out, but just because I knew I was a broken girl, but I wasn't afraid of that, and I wasn't ashamed. I was ready to tell people, and I was just praying that the Lord would use Grant's accident for good. And then so in my life, that's what that looked like. So I was like, okay, what God? And that's when I started the podcast. I just started praying about it, and he just kept making a way and kept making a way. And so I started the podcast. It was the first like 6 to 8 months were not miserable, but it was kind of miserable. I could never figure out how to use the technology. I would be up late at night, like it's Tuesday, like I up, and I would have been trying, and lots of people had to call and be like, how do I do this? My computer. So it was a rough, but now we're kind of in a groove, not have it all figured out, but the Lord is just still providing, and I plan to keep doing it until it's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Awesome. So you started as a junior in high school or senior year?
It would have been the beginning of junior year.
Okay. And then how was that just in high school and then being on a platform? And did you go to a public school?
I did.
Okay. Yeah. So how was all that too?
Somebody told my mom once I started the podcast, they were like, watch out for spiritual warfare. And I had just never heard that word before. And she was like, the devil is going to come and attack your family, and in a nice way, like, watch out. And at first I took offense to that. I was like, oh, like, blah, blah, blah. You just don't want me to do this.
Right.
And then I was real. It was every little thing. He came for my health. He came for, like, I was in the hospital for a week here. Like, while I was in the hospital, it was silly. Like, just like little things like that. It was just like the devil was attacking. But the reward was so great. And I also know my reward is in heaven. And so I was like, this can be hard now if it's bringing people closer to Jesus. But just being in high school, it honestly brought up the good side of it. It brought up really good conversations. It would pop up on people's Instagrams. Technically I'm in the Bible Belt, but I go to a public high school. So it's like, Jesus is not talked about. Jesus is not talked about. As it feels like kind of as we keep going, it just kind of gets darker and darker and darker. And I saw a lot of things that broke my heart in school. And a lot of people just flat out disagreed with what I believed in. But it did in return give a lot of ways for people to be like, hey, you have this podcast. Why did you start it? And I was able to share my testimony. And then after telling my testimony, I was able to share the gospel. And so it did have a lot of really cool opportunities, just conversation starter.
Yeah.
I mean, the hard side was, people would make fun of me. Like drunk people at football games would come up and to me, and I would just like, me and my friends would just laugh it off. Thankfully, I had a really good community set once I started class. And so I kind of had rocky community for a while, but by the time junior year came around, I had a solid group that was just like, we were chasing Jesus together. And so it didn't really affect me too much of what the outside was saying. And I also experienced something hard, and life was put in perspective for me. I was like, if you're going to make fun of me for this, that's fine. I pray that in 20 years, when you love Jesus, you're going to remember. Maybe not, it doesn't matter if you know my name or my face, but I pray that you remember, like, oh, that's what that girl was talking about.
Right.
Or that's why she loved me well, or that's why she kept doing what she was doing. And so it's given a lot of opportunities for good conversations, and some people making fun of me, but that's all right. That comes with anything, it feels like.
Yes. No, that's awesome. I think I just like am amazed by you and how you started in high school, because in college I was so intimidated of doing something like this. I remember telling my dad, like, when I wanted to start a podcast, I was like, yeah, I'll just wait till after college. Like, that'll be after college.
Yeah.
He's like, no, why don't you like start it now? And I was like, just so intimidated by what people would think of me, like how they would perceive me. And a lot of times I was scared to be perceived as a goody two-shoes Christian girl that no one could relate to, because I kind of mentioned this in we recorded a podcast with her podcast episode earlier for this. But anyways, also go check that out. But yeah, so I definitely like saw that being like, I don't want to be known as just the podcast girl or the girl that everyone thinks is, well, one thing I didn't want to be someone, you've probably experienced this, someone who's acts like this on social media and then in their real life isn't like this at all. So that was something I really struggled with, because like, I'm not perfect. I mess up all the time. Like, my voice on the podcast isn't how I act 24/7, because like everyone has mood swings and deals with stress and stuff like that. And so that was really hard, of just being like, okay, how can I be real on the podcast and tell truth on the podcast without it being sounding like I'm judging someone or I'm perfect or I have it all together. So I don't know if you've ever experienced that, of like,
so deeply.
Anyone, like you said, like people probably backlash at you, but have you ever gotten the feeling of like, just like people think you're judging them when you're just trying to love on them?
Yeah. Honestly, I try my best to be as open about like my struggles of like, just by the way, guys, I just yelled at my mom, or hey, I was in a bad mood, I need to apologize. And so it does keep you accountable to like be quicker to apologize and be genuine in that. But that is a big fear of like, oh, am I going to not become approachable because, quote unquote, or, when I walk by and everyone stops cussing, it's like, well, I'm not going to attack you. I'm not like, know what was happening. And so that is hard. Just like, I want to be approachable. And so just like loving people well. And I found if I'm vulnerable with them first, they still feel I'm not on a pedestal. I don't deserve to be on a pedestal.
Exactly.
I'm so broken. And so I think often just like reminding others of like, I struggled with this. Will you keep me accountable for this? And just like trying to love people there and then be vulnerable with them so they know I'm like human. But I think one of the biggest thing is, I asked my parents the other night, I was like, do you ever wish you knew the Sophie that other people brag about? Because other people come up and be like, oh my gosh, she's so sweet. She's so sweet. But then I come home and I'm like everywhere and I'm like so upset and I like
I'm the same way.
Fast and I'm like, sorry, I shouldn't have yelled at you, or I shouldn't have, had a bad attitude or rolled my eyes. And so often you guys do see the part of me that everyone knows, like, oh, she's fun. Oh, she loves Jesus. Oh, I'm going to have sure. Obviously, my parents see that side of me, and they're the reason that I know Jesus. They brought me up. But I do tend to feel guilty a lot of like, I wish I could always be this perfect girl where I have the best attitude and I'm quick, to be gentle and quick to do this and slow to anger and quick to listen. And like, I wish I was always like that at home. And, my parents were like, no, it's special that we get to see the broken side of you. Because that's also why I need Jesus. And it's that reminder of like, I'm never outgrowing my need for Jesus. And honestly, growing closer to Jesus reminds me of my need for Jesus more. But yeah, I think there it is. Like, I want to be approachable and I want to be real, and I want to be real to my family, where it's like, you are seeing the version of me that everyone loves. And you're also seeing the deepest, hard parts of me that I'm sorry that you had to see. But also, you're my family and thank you for loving me.
Yeah.
Even with that.
No,
So,
that's really good. I think that really helps me too, because a lot of times I'm just so nasty, but not just out of like rudeness for them. I think it's sometimes a lot of times anyone can see this, but it's like it's always something that you're dealing with, and then it's coming out onto other people, especially people that you live with every day. But I love how honest you were, just telling like everyone listening, like being a Christian doesn't mean you're perfect. Like following the Lord doesn't mean it's always perfect days. Like there's gonna be hard days. Like you even said, spiritual warfare. Like when you're following the Lord's plan and you're following his calling for your life, like the enemy's gonna try to attack because he hates that. And I actually never really thought of it of like I just had things happen in my life since starting the podcast, and I'm like, oh, maybe that actually might be spiritual warfare because
the devil's afraid of he wants to knock us down because he's afraid of what the Lord can do. And it's not what he's not afraid of what I can do, but he's afraid of what the Lord can do.
Right.
And when you have a willing heart, he wants to shut it down. And
Yeah.
it's scary. And the amount of times I say out loud, like, go away, Satan, because somewhere in the Bible it says, like, rebuke him in Jesus' name.
Yeah, exactly.
Say, like, in Jesus' name, get out of here. And
Say
so
no. Yeah.
I'm like, Satan, Jesus tells me to get you out of here.
Mhm.
Like, Lord, get Satan out of here. And always leaves.
Yeah, leaves. That's so good. So you're about to be a freshman in college. What is some things, one just in this like transition time period? Because I feel like between college and post grad, I have a lot of like listeners who are college and post grad, but also like, people. Sorry, like moving on to like real world jobs and then like high school grad and then into like freshman year of college. What is like advice you have right now for listeners in this like transition season of just like don't know what their life's going to look like in a month, in 2 months?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, like, not to say that I'm not afraid. Like, I do have fears of like the unknown, and I have a big of like, am I going to be able to find community? Am I going to be able to find my people? Am I going to be approachable? Or are people going to be like, oh, she's this, you know? But I also have a lot of peace about that. I know I'm making the right decision. And so I think first, like being confident in what you're doing. And so that means you needed to have been and continue to be prayerful about that decision. And so maybe that is like going into the real world or going into college or going into high school, whatever that looks like.
Right.
Like being prayerful of that, and having people pray for you. Like it almost honors people to be like, hey, will you pray for this? Like if somebody asked me to pray for something, I'm so excited and honored that they trusted me.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think being prayerful about it. But one thing I'm doing is I've started a Bible study, just like a random one that I found. I know it's a Bible one that I'm going to be starting like 2 or 3 weeks before I go to college, and it'll finish like 3 weeks into college. And so it's only 6 weeks.
Yeah.
To have that consistent thing of it's a day, everyday thing. And one of my good friends, she's going to Clemson actually.
Okay.
He got it with me. And
awesome.
the past like month and a half, we've been doing different Bible studies together. And so right now we're meeting together doing it. We just did one on Psalms 23. It was actually life-changing. Like,
wow.
It was the most incredible thing I've ever done. But we did it on our own every day. And on the 5th day, we would meet at a coffee shop and say like, oh, I learned this, or I saw this.
That's
and
amazing.
And we get to pray together. And so we're going to be doing that, even though we're not going to the same school. We're doing that, starting the next one, to be able to do that through the start of college. And so even when it's crazy, even when my schedule's like brand new, I'm still at least going to have 5 minutes of time word. And so it's like every day I know I'm going to pick up, do this, and I have accountability because on a Sunday we're going to call and say, hey, I saw this. What did you see?
Right.
And so I think just being faithful to stay in the word, which is so hard. And I'm the first to say, like, I'll miss a day and miss a week and miss a month. Like, so quick to that, but trying to get in the habit of reading God's word, whether that looks like in a Bible study, if you're not ready just to read straight out of the Bible, like starting a Bible study, getting a friend. You don't need to have this whole big group, just like one friend to do it with you and to keep you accountable. And I'm just praying that will help my transition go a little smoother.
Yeah.
Even just, just have that constant thing. Like everything's changing, but I'm going to have this one constant thing, and it's going to be opening my Bible.
Good advice.
And I'm going to church the first Sunday I get to school. I grew up on a college campus. My dad works at one, and so quickly I would see, I saw the routine of like, oh, I'm going to go next week. If this first week's too crazy, I'm going to go next week. And then that week turns into now it's Christmas break and you didn't go one time.
Right.
And that's not out of judgment, but it's just out of like, I know I need a routine. And so I'm just like committing to like going to church the first Sunday. And so hopefully that like transition season of just keeping my foundation on the firm foundation, who is Jesus Christ.
That's awesome. Well, I'll definitely check in on you in 6 weeks and see how you're doing. But I'd love that advice. I think I wish I had that. I wish I had someone tell me that, like going into college. And because I think that transition period, it's so hard because, well, one, like every season in your life is going to be different. And the Lord always has new seasons for you. But I think a lot of times for me, I don't know if anyone listening feels like this, but like I'll tend to rush a certain season just to get to the next, where a lot of times like life's a climb, but the view's great. But but it's like when you're really just present into the certain season that the Lord's placed you in, like that's where you get the full potential of like what he's trying to teach you, what he's trying to, like learn and grow and meet these friendships and all this stuff. And I think a lot of times I regret not just like pausing and enjoying the season I'm in instead of just like rushing to the next. Like, for instance, like everyone trying to get to summer. Like, I wish it was summer. I wish it was summer. And then when you're in summer, it's like, oh, I want to go back to school already. I miss my friends, that type of thing. So that's really cool.
That also goes back to like what you were saying earlier about like when you were starting your podcast of like, I'll wait till after college. Like that's how it was. Like once the Lord put it on my heart, I was in high school and I was like, oh, that's something I can do.
Right.
And in middle school, I was like, oh, I want to like lead a Bible study. Okay, I'll do that in college. It's like, no, I can do that now. I can do that with my like team now. And so just like be like, where are your feet right now?
Mm-hmm.
Just do it now. Like, why are we waiting? But I am quick to be like, oh, I just can't wait to do this. And I can't wait to do this. And I'm like, no, I need to slow down. Like, this is a sweet summer. Like, this is my last summer with all of like my childhood friends.
Yeah.
So we like branch off. And so it's just like little things like that of like, no, this is a sweet time.
Yes.
And soak it in.
Yes, exactly. Well, how are you feeling? Like, do you think you'll keep recording episodes like every Tuesday in college? I know you're not there yet, but are you bringing like all your? Are you staying in a dorm? So you bring all your dorm in there? Okay.
That's a plan right now.
Yeah.
I mean, unless something changes, and
you
like try to stay in tune with the Lord of like, is this still working? Is this still honoring and pleasing to God? And once it stops being honoring and pleasing to the Lord, then I'll stop. Once it starts being to make my name known or to, if once my heart posture, I think, gets out of line, I'll at least first take a break. And if I can't get it back, then I'm just going to take time off. But I plan on trying at least.
Good. Yeah, I think my advice is like, it's okay if you can't make every Tuesday. Like this summer has been hard for me, like making every Sunday, and like I haven't recorded since last week and like this week, and I'm like I'm okay with that because I know like I'm learning a lot this summer and I'm really just being present with the people I'm with. And sometimes I was like that's really what I need right now, just being prayerful of like where your heart's at in it. So I encourage you just like next year if it's too much, it's okay if you have to post an episode on a Friday when you're supposed to post it on a Tuesday, And I think that helps too. Like you're still getting the word out. You're still the voices that are telling their story. Like it's still going to be heard. It doesn't have to be on a certain date, even though don't change it. But I'm saying like don't stress out in college because a lot of times, and that was really hard for me too. Like in like especially I think sophomore year was a little different because like where I go to school, like you live in an apartment, so like freshman year I had a dorm, so it was easier to like because I used to record in the Clemson libraries freshman year, so it was easy to access. And then sophomore year I was like, okay, well I have to wait till my roommates are gone, so I'm like quiet and not disrupting them, and then I have to like invite guests to my house, that type of thing, if they were like around Clemson area. So either way, just like let the Lord's timing, between years, that. But I just think that was my advice, and I wish I knew that too when I was starting out in college. Yeah. Well, I know you talked a lot about just your testimony and how that is with how you started with the podcast, but is there anything like before there anything else we need to know at all that you haven't mentioned?
Yeah. So, well, sort of. I'll share a little bit of my testimony. I grew up in a family that loved the Lord, was pursuing the Lord. My mom, like, it felt like our house was our mission field. And like my dad coaches a college team. His girls would just come over. We just have people staying with us.
Cool.
like my mom and dad were quick to just, yep, come over, come and stay with us. You need a place to live. You need to do this. And just like seeing that lived out. And then as I got older, I understood like the meaning behind it of like, oh, some people need to see how Jesus works in a family and works in a marriage. And our family is far from perfect. And sometimes it's a hot mess, but just like growing up in the same church that I was baby dedicated in, that I was baptized in, that now I get to teach a little Sunday school class. And so it's just been a full circle. And obviously middle school is awkward for everybody. And so I had like a fine middle school experience. I had a hard time. I really wanted to fit in. Really badly. Like I would do everything I could to fit in. Like wear, like, oh, I need to wear this. I'm wearing this. I'm going to say this. I'm going to do this. And just like craving the approval of the people that I thought were my friends. And then COVID happened when I was in 8th grade, which is so strange.
That's crazy.
Show up to high school, and we're only in high school every other day for like the first couple months.
Yeah.
My experience of high school, we were like every other day because of COVID. And then like 3 months into my freshman year of COVID, my childhood like big brother, so his mom, my mom are best friends, and my brother and him are best friends. And so he was my big brother. We did everything growing up together. We had Christmas with him, Thanksgiving, like literally everything. He was killed in a car accident one night. And like I woke up to the news. So like I walked downstairs seeing my mom crying, and she tells us, and I just remember like running because I didn't have school that day. It was honestly like the Lord's provision in that. Like I didn't have to go to school that day.
Right.
And I put my running shoes on and I literally ran away. This like almost, now that I look back, it was just simple, like trying to run from my problems, trying to run from hardship. And at that point he was still on life support. He was still alive. And I just like fell on my knees once I got far enough away in my neighborhood that I knew no one in my family would see me. And I just had my headphones in, and I was like blasting worship music because I didn't know what else to do. And I knew like, well, I have Jesus. And I was crying out to God and probably said 3 words, just kept saying, Jesus, Jesus. And that is my word of encouragement. Whenever I was little, my mom would always say, like, if you don't know what to say, just call on Jesus. And in times when I don't know what to say, I'm just like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And that's all I could do. I eventually got home, and just that week kind of is a blur. Eventually he passed away. And it was just now learning life, understanding death, and experiencing death when I was like 14 years old. Somebody so near to my heart, and he was so young. And so there's a lot of like, I know no one else who has lost somebody this young. And everyone else is like, okay, you've lost somebody. It was your great grandpa or your grandparents, which is so hard. And I'm not saying that's not hard, but it's a different pain of like, oh, well, they lived their whole life. And I get to look back and reflect on this. But it's like, well, Grant never went to college. He never graduated high school. He never got married. He never had kids. And all of these things that you could dwell on. And so a lot of that was hard. By the time December hit of that year, I was like 3 months out. And I started having very anxious tendencies, but I didn't have any words for anything I was going through. And so I told my mom, I was like, I think I'm supposed to go to therapy or something because something's wrong with me. And she was like, of course. And we found a Christian grief therapist, and almost like a year of that learned I had like, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. Anxiety is like probably deeper rooted in me. And it was going to come up and struggle in some way. But when I get really anxious, it falls into quick depression. And then I lost a lot of friends 9th grade year. So my friend died, but I also lost my friend group, except one friend, because they were at the time more interested in the things of this world. And I either was too sad to do anything with them. And I also knew like, well, so far, the only way I've gotten through this tragedy was Jesus. And I'm not ready to live for the world. And I also can't get out of bed. So that doesn't matter. And so just anxiety and depression, honestly, like I let them be who I was for a solid like year and a half. And something sort of switched to me after I had some very intense suicidal thoughts, that it was just like, how did I get here? Like, how am I in the bathroom floor? Like even thinking about this, talking about this, and just like a cry out for help. And so sort of after that, I guess that would get me around sophomore, junior year of high school. And I still like daily battle with anxiety and depression, but it's not who I am anymore. It's not my identity. It's not introduce myself, and just like learning that the Lord holds me so tightly. And then community came, and different opportunities to serve in the church came, and just coming more connected with Jesus. And that's when I was able to hear like callings on my life that I was like, oh, I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher. Oh no, I'm not supposed to be a kindergarten teacher. Like God is calling me something greater. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm willing to say yes. And that's kind of how the podcast came about. I just wrote like a little book. It's like being published right now or whatever. And like, just
wow.
like saying
Awesome.
and knowing that I'm broken and that, but for some reason I'm still here. Like I should have died, but I didn't. And so I'm here, and I need to share my story, not to like make my story known, but make Jesus's story known. Like through my whole story of just like figuring out like, oh, I need to pray. I need to seek wise counsel. Like I need to sit on the couch with my youth pastor and his wife and tell them what is going on, what these thoughts are, what this is, just to like get guidance and for people to be praying with me and call me out when they see it going down. So that's where and here we are now.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's just amazing. One, that you were just so young going through that, but two, just seeing now like how mature you are and how that's really just the Lord like maturing you and like how you're living out for his life and living out your life for his love and for his plan. And just seeing that through your podcast and just getting to know you now has been so exciting. I will say I kind of relate to that, your story. I didn't really get into it when you asked me about my testimony, but when I think it was sophomore year, so probably COVID when you were in 8th grade. I don't know the age gap, but my cousin randomly passed away. They didn't know why. She was 15, so she was like my best friend. Like I was 15 too, and I think they said it was like 1 in a million like heart thing that happened to her, but no one knew why. She died in her sleep, and I remember that just being really hard for me, just being like, why? Like she was an amazing believer. Like she had so many plans for life, but why her? Why not someone else, that type of thing. So I really struggled with that too, of just like what happened, and a lot of anxiety started from that. I remember going to school and being like, my heart, like I feel like something's wrong with me, like I'm dying, like that the feeling when you're getting a panic attack and you're like, what's wrong with me? I would get those like every day at school, thinking like something was wrong with me, and I would go to the nurse and just be like, what's wrong? I would go to I like snap my wrist out.
Literally, I saw your hand pop up.
It does that when I'm like moving. Anyways, I would like go to the hospital and be like, they'd test me, be like, oh, no, you're fine. There's no heart thing. And no one would tell me it was a panic attack because I didn't know what anxiety was back then. And so I really there was one moment where I randomly found my journal from like a summer camp we went to. It was like a Christian summer camp that me and my cousin went to, and she wrote in it. And I like started bawling my eyes out because I'm like, that's so cool that I haven't found it until like this day when I just needed something. So I remember just being like, you know what? No, like the Lord has a plan. Like he's always good, like even when bad things happen. And I really just took that as like, just really starting to like live for him in that. And that's kind of what took me. I know people have heard this on this podcast, but how I was telling you about moving and like trusting in his plan, that type of thing. But ever since then, like anxiety is still a thing that I deal with. It's something that you have to like say no to Satan, because I think that's one of the ways that he tries to attack people who already feel like they have anxiety or get diagnosed with that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just one thing where it's like, even when you're a Christian, it's not hard. I mean, it's not easy, and it's gonna be hard, but like you just got to keep going, because like you said, in the end goal, like you're living for heaven, you're living for him, and like in the end it's going to be so much better than anything imagined in the world. So thank you for sharing that, because I just hope anyone that's going through something or has a story like this knows like it gets better. He has a plan, and like there's community out there for you, So yes. Well, thank you so much for talking, and I'm so glad that we got to finally do this. It took us like we were talking on her podcast, but it took us probably like maybe 2 months, 3 months. I just kept canceling, and then I was like, I felt so bad, but it worked out.
Yes, and like the Lord's timing. I think I talked about this on my last podcast, that it wasn't you, but I had 2 other people cancel on me.
Oh wow!
And so for 2 weeks I had solo episodes, which was totally fine. But it was like, well, why is this happening? Like, why was this timing? And it was like, no, because his timing is better. Like, if you end up coming on the podcast, it's because when that happens, it's supposed to happen then.
Exactly.
just like trusting his timing and his plan. But you're so sweet. You've been so kind, and I'm just like soaking up all your college advice. I'm ready. Like, okay.
Well, text me anytime.
Yes, really.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited for you and just the future and everything that the Lord's doing in your life. So thank you for coming on, and maybe we'll see each other again.
So I'll have to come to Clemson at some point.
Yes, we'll do an in-person episode.
Yes.
That'd be fun. Well, I'm gonna end the recording and then we can talk too. But thank you guys, and we'll hopefully see you next week. Bye.
Bye.